Welcome to the Expert's Journey podcast, where we're all about creating your path to impact. Join your hosts, Dixie Mary Carlton from Indie Expert Publishing and Mr. Web Marketing Brad Houck, as we look at how you can grow your business and influence by leveraging your knowledge for profit. Welcome back to the Expert's Journey podcast. Today, we're going to look at the effects of what's happening in the Middle East on travel. So as speakers and authors, we get around a lot doing events and we're promoting ourselves, we're going to conferences, we're doing all those things, but we're starting to see the flow-on effects when it comes to travel and the cost of things and the delaying of flights, etc. So today we're going to have a chat about that and some of the options that are available and how it might be affecting you and how you might get around this. Good morning, Dixie.
Good morning, Brad. How are you going today?
Thanks.
Excellent. Well, I've just been listening to some interesting talkback on radio, and a professor of economics and his insights into what's going on with regards to the economy and the flow-on effects of supply chains and things. And it occurred to me, as also crossed my mind on Saturday, that things are not as they usually are. So on Saturday, I awoke to a message from the airlines that my flight from Bali to Singapore next month has now been cancelled. And this is a month out. And I thought, ouch, that's not fun. And then when I managed to rebook with a completely different airline, the flight was nearly double what it would normally be. And I thought, oh, that's starting to hurt. And I'm glad that I've booked my flight back from Singapore to New Zealand for the beginning of May as secure. But I'm a little nervous about jumping onto any travel sites and booking anything new at the moment. How about you?
Yeah, it's very much the way. We were thinking of taking a holiday to Europe in July, and already the flights right up to halfway through June are cancelled because they're going through the Middle East. And we're just waiting to hear whether the rest have been cancelled. But we're basically probably going to pull a pin on that because what some people are doing, booking alternate flights, but of course, straight away, all your major airlines like Singapore Airlines and those other routes got booked up. So there's no real alternative. But of course, the costs have gone through the roof as the costs of fuels have become increasingly high, thanks to what's happening over there in the Middle East.
Yes, it's really interesting. This session I was just listening to was talking about, let's say, for example, in New Zealand, it takes 9 weeks from the time the oil comes out of the ground to when it goes into the car. And in New Zealand, we have apparently about 50 days worth of supply still in play, in storage, and there are still ships arriving with oil. And so the newsreader was saying, well, that doesn't mean that we're in crisis, that's still business as normal and it may all resolve itself by then. And the guy who was the professor was saying, yes, but there are all of these additional factors that over time, there will be the big knock-on effect. And he made some comparisons to what was happening during the COVID times. And so as you start to see the supply chains change, and of course, everyone was talking about how even over Easter, fewer people were already opting to go away for the weekend. Traffic on the motorways is already a little less congested. And some people are starting to notice that. Auckland Transport last week had its highest use of transport ever recorded. So it's that public transport. So when you start to notice little things like that, where the middle of New Zealand and the bottom of the world is starting to feel the pinch, even though theoretically we're not in a crisis state yet, it does make you wonder, how is this going to affect the conference industry and the speaking industry and workshops that we do and things that we do live and we'll travel across state or out of country for? How does this look for all of us 6, even 3 months down the line?
Yeah, I think it depends on where you are in the world. There's no doubt about that. We live on islands, so everything comes to us. And obviously Australia's done some deals with our suppliers. But if you're in Europe, well, it's a different kettle of fish. In America, the same thing. They have different supplies, different suppliers, and different modes of transport too. So, much higher rates of public transport, so trains and things like that in Europe to get around rather than having to get on a plane. But we're already seeing here where some companies who say run 5 services a day from Brisbane to Sydney have cancelled 4 of them. So while there's still one service going, the other 4 have been pulled out because of the perceived costs and the fact that the plane has to be absolutely full to make it worthwhile. And I think when you look at the conference industry, you've got people flying in for conferences, certainly here and I mean around the world. A lot of people will fly into places because it's the most convenient way to do it. So where you might have a conference and you've got 400 people coming in, suddenly it becomes quite expensive to fly those 400 people in. So what other options are available? And some companies won't have a choice because they're doing a company conference and it's once a year and certain people come and they've already booked speakers and all those sorts of things. Other people will be like, well, we're planning, so let's go virtual or whatever. So it really does depend on who and where you're speaking for, I think, more than anything.
I haven't been to a conference yet where there have been people dialing in. I know that it happens. I know that it's possible. And I've seen some pretty sophisticated use of technology in that space. But I don't know how I would feel if I was flying in on an expensive conference situation and half of the speakers were now virtual. I would feel a little cheated, I think. And so that would make me rethink about whether to go to that conference live or not anyway. And so that sort of thing must be obviously a thing in play for a lot of people. And the conference industry planning out even as far as next year. So we're now in 2026, a lot of things are already set in place. But if we're talking about what's going to happen even in 2027, a lot of conference organizers and big companies are already well through their planning stage with those events. So speakers not getting booked well ahead into 2027 or even to the last quarter of this year does start to make you feel a little nervous.
Yeah, definitely. And I think as you said, there's a big difference between virtual and in-person conferences. You don't really want to pay big money to go into a conference and then have the person being in. I don't think that makes a lot of sense. I get it if everyone's virtual, but if 5 speakers are not virtual, one person is, it makes it difficult. But then there is circumstances where things change and someone can't come and they say, well, I'll still do it for you, but I just can't be there. So I do understand both sides of thinking, but I suppose it depends on what you're paying for the conference. If you're going for free, well, whatever. If you're not going for free, another story. And the other thing is too, some topics lend themselves to virtual more so. So if you talk about AI like I do, that probably lends itself more to virtual because I can demonstrate stuff if I want to add more interactivity. Alternatively, if you're doing a motivational speech, it probably won't come across the same because you lose that feeling, that energy that's in the room when someone who's a motivational speaker is speaking, because the whole room comes alive. There's that whole energy. So, yeah, there's a lot in play with that.
Do you think that we should all be scurrying to get ourselves certified as virtual presenters at the moment?
Well, I don't know. I question the validity of being certified as a virtual speaker. I've seen options where you can get that qualification, but I've not seen the requirements or what makes a virtual speaker really different to a normal speaker or a normal presenter on Zoom, for example. I think there's certainly some skill sets that you need to learn. For example, when you're presenting on Zoom, you need like 7 times the amount of slides because you need to keep people moving forward all the time, which is not always easy. So there's skills like that I think that you do need. On the other hand, I think we've only just scraped the bottom of the barrel when it comes to virtual speaking. I think 90% of people, in fact, I'd say 98% of people are still doing exactly what you and I are doing right now, sitting in front of a computer talking. And I don't think that we've moved to the next level where you actually have the camera set back further and it's you, full you, like you would be on stage talking. I don't think most people are doing that. I think that's a very small percentage. And I think that's where we really need to go if we want to take virtual speaking to the next level.
I think you're right. And I look at people like, for example, Keith Abraham, who I believe was significantly busy during COVID because he invested in setting up a really solid studio. So he could do exactly that and appear to be in a studio setting. And so his speaking was continually very busy throughout COVID. And I think that comes then down to the question of, do we rush out and start getting ready for that now? Do we anticipate the potential change and another potential downturn in our live work? Or do we rest back and think, well, hopefully this will pass and we learned everything that we needed to about the conference industry changing so dramatically from last time, and think that it's still going to be business as usual in 6 months' time? I personally don't think it is going to be business as usual in 6 months. I think that this is going to mean that we all look at our entire skill sets and factor in how we can best deliver that across multiple platforms better, and maybe doing more local work in a stronger way.
Yeah, I think there's an opportunity. Like, it's pretty hard to have your own studio. It's an expensive outlay to set up. Not so much in the technology area, to be quite frank. You can do it all with a Mac M5 these days. There's no issue with the technology buying it. It's more a case of the width of the room, the backgrounds and all that. So one thing I was watching the other day that I'm really interested in was someone was talking about the background I'm using here, for example, but they're actually using a TV screen behind them.
Okay.
So the camera is zoomed in, you don't see the edge of the TV screen, but they can change the background instantly. All they got to do is just adjust their lighting so that their lighting matches the background. So if I'm sitting in a room with a dark wood grains or something, I'd turn my lighting down. And it was really interesting. I was looking at TVs the other day thinking about it, because I've got like a 55 on the wall here, but you'd really need to be up to 75 sort of size to get that width behind you. But then if you were going to go and do virtual presenting where you're standing up, that wouldn't be big enough. You'd actually need a wall. And I noticed out of China now, you can buy the stick-on LED walls where you just roll it out and connect them together. So there's certainly a lot of technology coming through, which means that we should be able to go to that full electronic wall background, which we're now seeing in movies being used, where they're actually not using green screen. They're using a full animated wall, is the best way to put it, using Unreal Engine 5. So it looks like a game, except real world pictures. And the person standing in front of it, it looks like they're really there. So they're not green screening the person in. The background's the green screen. So I think there's an opportunity there, but it may be that we've got to look at, do we need to go to the point where we have studios set up in places and you hire the studio for your presentation? And I know there is some things like that, and I'm starting to see them advertised on Facebook, but I think there's a big opportunity there. When you've got big presentations, maybe you need to think about, how do I take this to the next level and actually make it good?
Yeah, you're right. There's so many opportunities, and I hadn't heard about that particular type of backdrop. It's intriguing to start going down the rabbit hole, if you like, of how much you can spend on technology. How far do you need to go? Do we need to sit back and wait and see how things develop? Or do we anticipate that things are going to change and we need to be at the very front end of some of these levels of technology so we can promote ourselves this way? Or do we need to think about changing the way we position ourselves? For example, being more focused on local presentations so that you don't have to travel so far, or going fully into just podcasting. And there's a lot of good ideas around that. Podcasting, virtual online workshops and things like that. And I've been doing a few of those this year and last year. And they're relatively easy to do, but it's a matter of how do we navigate the changes in our industry when it affects our income if people are less prepared to spend the money on getting the training as well? Because as things bite recession-wise and everything snowballs into the tentacles go out of where it affects everybody, from food supply and food chain, which, as this guy was talking about this morning, he's saying the next big issue beyond the oil is fertilizer, which if fertilizer is not able to get to where it needs to go, then that impacts on the food shortages, which impacts on everything else as well. So things that I hadn't thought about. So as recession talk bites, how do we shore up our resources to make sure we can carry on and carrying on?
Yeah, some problems, I suppose, are bigger than us. They are government problems. And that's why you vote for a good government, not just who you think's popular. As we've seen around the world, that can sometimes backfire on you. So I think there's elements you can do yourself. For example, stepping up and making sure that you have a power supply. Its power supply runs out. I've had a generator for a couple of years because we have huge cyclones and it wipes out the power lines around here. Last week, I put in a battery system. So now I can run completely free from the sun and it charges the battery. I can run my air conditioning, charge my car, everything from it. So, you can make steps to protect yourself. It's like having links with your internet connection. Most people have their optical fiber link or whatever it is coming into the house. But do you have a backup link? Now, we learned in COVID that you actually need a backup link as well, like a 4G link, in case your physical landline link goes down. So a lot of people were buying modems with dual links in them to be able to cover themselves. So there's certainly things when you're thinking about supply chains disruption, how it affects you. The flow-on effects could be huge or small. But we know from experience now, some of the things are going to happen. For example, the oil coming out of the Middle East, I've been told for every day it's down, it's 2 days up. So it could take up to 200 days to start everything back up and get it running properly again. And I grew up at an oil refinery. My mum worked there, my godfather worked there. It's around the corner from my home. And I know when they went into shutdown to test, clean and all that stuff, it was a 30-day program. So it's 30 days down and then they had to come back up. That was just to convert crude oil into petrol and diesel and stuff. So it's a very long process. So the flow-on effects of any crisis are huge and we often don't know what they are, but at least we have had a glimpse of what could happen because of COVID now. And we know from watching presenters during that time that using community groups is a great way to connect with your community and keep in touch. But then using Zoom and tools like that allows you to reach out across the world. Hopefully we're going to start to get some better tools than Zoom because Zoom itself is not the best tool on the market. It's just the most popular one currently, and it took off during the pandemic. But it certainly could do with a lot of improvement. For example, the quality of video could be much better. And there's things like that we need to look at.
So your top 3 on your list of preparation for things taking a turn would be what?
I think the first one is that you got to be prepared to pivot. Okay. As a firefighter, I talk about change and being able to cope with change is the biggest one. So get yourself in the mindset right now that things will go wrong. And things are not going to work out as fast as you wish they will because they won't. That's the nature of things. So be prepared in your mind and also in your plans that you're ready to pivot to another way of doing it. The second is if you're doing any speaking engagements or community engagements, whether it's promoting your book, whether it's speaking, whatever it is, talk with the people you're supposed to be working with on that. And say, what plans do we have in place? Or have we thought about this? What happens if people can't turn up and suddenly we've got no one in the room? How are we going to do this? So prepare with the people you're working with. And then thirdly, start to look at your technology and your ability to deliver what you do. Is there a better way to do it? Is there a different way to do it? Or a more effective way is probably the best way. Or is it a case of I'm going to have to get in a car, drive to Sydney, deliver and drive home. It's that simple, like we did in the old days. We get the horse and the cart out and off we go. I often think we've been spoiled given the times we live in when I listen back to some of the people I knew in the past who built big businesses who were driving a couple of hours every night to talk to people and then having to drive back and go to work the next day, that sort of stuff. So, we're blessed where we are now. So they're probably my 3 things.
Yeah. That's a good list. I would be thinking also of backup plans for where you can work in terms of technology, making sure that your internet is really solid and that you have the ability to say, I can deliver this online and or live, and making sure that your whole presentation is geared towards the and or. And even if you're doing live, making sure that, it's fit for live streaming as well. And of course, being prepared to be far more self-sufficient in terms of, as you say, do I get into a car and drive, or do I fly, or do I suck it up and pay the extra for the benefit of flying? And do I just maybe slow down and ease my expectations on myself about how much I can achieve inside of a year if I am having to slow down due to reduced travel capabilities? So that would be
Yeah.
my three. Mm.
And I make a point. A lot of people, when we talked about virtual studios before, we're talking about the electronic walls and things. Those things are available to you. It's just a matter of looking up online and finding one near you. There's definitely one in the capital city near you. If you're getting paid 10 grand to speak on stage, you can afford to spend 1 grand to hire that room and have the technicians there and make it look fantastic, as
Absolutely.
opposed to not delivering. It is a cost of business. You can write it off. It's not
100%.
perfect, but imagine the impact you're going to make. You probably get more gigs because you look spectacular.
Yeah. In fact, you're completely right. Look, there are studios for hire like that even here in Bali. And when I say even here in Bali, I shouldn't be quite so dismissive sounding. The technology here is extraordinary. The number of expats here and digital nomads. Some places are incredibly well set up for exactly that. And taking advantage of that, finding what's available in your area is easy to do. And just getting friendly with the people who run the events or run those studios is relatively straightforward. You just rock up and you start to get to know them so they know what you need. And if you need to be able to deliver something that's suddenly changed relatively quickly, they're ready to work with you because they already know who you are and what you require. So don't leave it to a last minute to start checking those options out and getting used to their systems and facilities.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, look, there's so many options available to you if you just go out and look around. But don't wait till things hit, because honestly, if you go and do this and you find a studio and it is $1,000, it may open up a whole new market for you. You know, think about it. You can do your podcasts in these places. They've got one set up for podcasts. You can do your ads and have the big moving wall behind you. There's so much more that you can use it for once you start using it. It's a bit like getting on television. So it could open up whole new streams of income and whole new opportunities, plus present you in a much bigger light than you would if you showed someone you doing Zoom.
Yes, exactly.
You know?
Well, let's keep our fingers crossed and hope it doesn't get as bad as some people are anticipating. And that in 3 months' time, we're sitting back thinking, phew, well, that was a close call, but we all got through it and everything's fine. That would be an ideal. But if it's not, then at least being prepared and listening to some of what we've just been talking about is a really good way of ensuring that you have started to make a list of how to get ready for tackling the next 6 to 12 months of change. And two things are absolutely certain: death and change. So, yeah, and taxes.
Absolutely. Well, if this episode has you thinking about writing a book, but you're not sure how to shape your ideas, reach out to Dixie at indieexpertspublishing.com. She'll help you turn what's in your head into a clear, compelling book that builds your authority. And if you're doing the work, but you're not getting enough clients and you want to sharpen your positioning and build marketing with AI that actually converts, join me in my authority multiplier group at bradhouck.com. Take the step that fits where you're stuck right now, and we'll catch you in the next episode.
Lovely. Thanks, Brad. Have a great week, everyone.